I'm fascinated by the quite endless and probably defensive discussions about Europe, its identity, legacy, and how it might limp into the future. To begin at the beginning and make the obvious connection to Christianity, all its claims to greatness, unless we include Vikings or during its Christian era. We do include Greeks and Romans, ha ha ha, clever that, but then skedaddle from the values that made them. We blithely claim Greece as ancestor, but would they agree? They would know and warn of the latent fascism of the one God, and definitely demand, how do you come to call that a democracy, since it so misses the point? The cold gloom of Christendom's cathedrals and music's droning sermons, the rule of law, as if they invented law, as if the Hindu have none and the Cherokee have none. There is a dreariness to it that might be alleviated by the flashes of relief it sometimes allows, but the circumscribing gloom clamps back down. Too sweet. Which might be why the culture is so desperate for riches, and why the rich are such fantasists, and the markets offer such superficial gobbets of happiness, with church, law, and democracy found wanting out of the way. What else is there to Europe? Empire. It's a dubious accolade. The Greeks had that, but 'twas fleeting, as it should be. Empire should last as long as an NBA off-season. Before the champion has to get back in the gym, replace the aging warriors, train up a new set, and taste the glory of losing next season anyway. It is, after all, character building. The Greeks were, perhaps logically, suicidal, choosing their Peloponnesian War out of hubris. Fighting their equal, maybe they're better, like the great boxers. Europe cannot acknowledge a better, though, so they keep blindly going in. Europe did most of its fighting among its fellows, but most of its conquering of others. As strong, if not stronger spiritually, but way behind militarily. It was like heavyweights against flyweights, and cowardice ran through the camps like dysentery. Clever that, too. What made the Spartans better than the rest was not its gunpowder over bows and arrows. The arms were almost always equivalent. Europe has many laws, of course. The blueprint Christian needs laws, curtailment. We're all such sinners. Sins to them, of course, in the tiny mind. That it makes a sin of homosexuality is all I need to know about the validity of its sinning sensibility. Its humans are born so flawed that without law they'd not use toilet paper. A natural child must be heavily indoctrinated and educated to be a monotheist. The natural child will veer off course, will choose the brighter colors and intuitiveness, rather than this wretched separation of body and soul, this base body. Without the shalt-nots, they will kill and covet and bear false witness, which they do despite the shalt-nots, or because of them. There is pretty obviously a taboo on killing, but no restraint on war or mass killing in the name of the demander of obedience to the laws. No cult has done more killing. Do I jest? No, not anymore. This is not cryptic and witty, nor satire. Satire needs intelligent listeners to be effective, and there is naught as unintelligent as mistaking obedience for life. It is silly to march for no kings when you can't live without kings. Just march against that king. The trick, I would venture, is not so much that Europe is at all an entity, a unity. Otherwise, we could convincingly blame the entire Western momentum since 1492 for its direct connection to the Nazi Holocaust. Exterminations abounded before and after. But we don't do that because, for so many reasons, we need this cultural identity to feel real, to feel anything. We cannot individuate even so faintly as to recognize real cultural differences. The entirety of the white West defended Israel against the October 7th rising, except Ireland. A country that didn't Brexit when it had the chance, a mini culture in midst of the great white monoculture. I looked up, Googled monoculture. Is Zionism a model of monoculture? No, AI said, because Israel has lots of political parties. So does fucking Scotland. It's still a monoculture, you morons. AI is always fun as it speaks unemotionally for the status quo. So far, so good, except the status quo is hysterical. The only reason Europe has such defenders as it does is because its arrogance and behavior on the planet has been so horrendous they need defenders just to walk. And its gifts, such as they are, even to its own people, are deeply dubious. The amazing iniquities in Europe that led directly to its restless quest for Lebensraum in 1492, the first, the blueprint, buzzing today in Musk's Martian plan, don't go changing, just expand the territory of exploitation, says Elon. Europe runs eternally from itself, like Christians tend to do. We can do whataboutism if you like. There can be lots said about Asian despots, etc., but that plays only if you need to believe a superiority. They can be just as effed up as you are, I admit, but that doesn't help you. And it isn't unified like the Euro-America blob. It really is BRICS, originally Brazil, Russia, India, China, and now added South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. NATO is white and Christian, you should notice. BRICS is all the rest. And there it is. There was a hilarious debate, in fact, one of quite a few that have popped up in social media in the last decade, about which is superior, Western or Eastern civilization. The Western zealot rises to speak more often than not, an Indian man or an Arabian to make the Western case, clever that. Then some bluff Scot will make the different case, admitting that the West is mightily motivated to be best, to be seen to be the best, that they will insist relentlessly they are the best. They cannot live without being superior. He will say that the only definable difference twixt East and West is the West's desperate need to be judged superior. It's evidence of such essential weakness. To be seen as, to seem. The actual inferiority complex, the reality of it being the most despotic, in fact, to have killed the most. And reflexively to have demonized the most, to speak of axes of evil and evil empires, demands that they claim the opposite of the truth. It is obvious in this desperation is very sad, but also very dangerous. If the claim of Christians were at all true, we'd have no problems. we'd have no American empire, but we do. Christianity, and probably the other two, must insist on this sleight of hand, duplicity, and now, thanks largely to social media, the engine, the intelligentsia, have blamed for today's chaos, when in fact it is them we can see better the size of this bloody field of lies. They seem to say, put us back in charge, listen to us. They who got us here in the first place. Now, since most of us obviously need a glorious past to get out of bed in the morning, to feel whole and sunny, there must be people everywhere whistling because they're Aussie, smiling because they're Javanese. I don't really know. I haven't been there. Does this marvelous new chap in Burkina Faso make speeches about how much better the Burkinos are than anyone else? Like we do? I don't remember it in Trinidad nor in Iraq. I was pretty young in those places, but arriving in the US at 11, I was inundated at grade school. How great was the US? What a departure from the rest we were. Of course, in Old England in the early 70s, they were a little worn as empire had slipped away and the working class were sexy and with fair wages at last, and the Rory Stewarts hadn't yet rehabbed the toffs, only to revert to type recently, so I'm unqualified to speak to what the non-European makes of life. I don't really mean to knock Europe, specifically, just to say they are pretty ordinary, as we all are, and we should take some solace in that, since most of what they brag about just does not stand up. Had the various empires planned to lift its most modest citizen, there'd be an argument. But apart from the ancient Persians, Cyrus, and marginally the Greeks, when Themistocles got the trireme rowers the vote, and the citizens to use the new-found silver lode to build a navy, this did not happen. So bollocks to them. Empire was created for the 1%. The engines of the successful empires, however we define them, were generally Caesars, Elizabeths, and Alexanders, with the help of their fellow aristocrats and historians and playwrights that made a lot of them. So most empires have a myth of the one man or the one woman. It's ridiculous.